when you feel unseen, when you feel like no one recognizes the weight you carry, it can be one of the most discouraging seasons of life. Because there's nothing more exhausting than showing up every day, giving your best, fighting battles in silence, and wondering if anyone even notices. But here is the truth. God sees what others overlook. He notices the quiet sacrifices you make, the times you kept serving even when your heart was heavy, the times you prayed when no one was listening, the times you showed up for people who didn't even say thank you. And that should remind you that you don't need human applause to validate divine approval, because God has eyes that miss nothing. He knows the very details of your life that people dismiss. He sees the silent struggle behind your smile. He sees the tears you wipe away before anyone else walks into the room. He sees the heaviness you carry when you lay in bed at night, pretending everything is fine. And just because people don't recognize, it doesn't mean God is blind to it. When David was in the fields watching sheep, nobody saw him. His father didn't even think he was worth mentioning when Samuel came looking for the next king. And yet God whispered to the prophet that the one overlooked was the one he had chosen. Because man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And what people overlook, God selects. What people dismiss, God values. What people ignore, God anoints. So maybe the reason you've been overlooked is because God is hiding you until the right moment. And the rejection you feel is not rejection at all. It's protection. Because sometimes God has to cover you until the time is right. And while you are hidden, you feel forgotten. But you are not forgotten. You are being prepared. And when the moment comes for God to elevate you, no one will be able to deny what He has placed on your life. You may be in a season where you feel invisible, where the work you're doing seems unnoticed, where your prayers seem unanswered and your efforts seem unrewarded. But you have to remember that God's attention is not like man's attention. He doesn't get distracted. He doesn't get bored. He doesn't miss the details. And just because people didn't clap for you doesn't mean heaven didn't record it. Every act of obedience, every moment of endurance, every silent battle you fought when you wanted to quit, God sees it, and He honors it in His timing. And if you could see how much God notices you, you wouldn't feel so discouraged by what people fail to notice. Because people can only see the surface, but God sees the depth. Think about Hagar, a woman who was cast out, unwanted, forgotten, sitting in the wilderness feeling unseen. But in that place of brokenness, she encountered a God who revealed Himself as El Roi, the God who sees me. And that revelation shifted her despair into hope, because she realized she was not invisible to God. And that's the same truth for you. You may feel forgotten by people, but you are seen by God. You may feel unimportant to the world, but you are priceless to Him. And even when you are at your lowest, when you feel abandoned, He is still watching over you, still guiding you, still holding you. Sometimes the reason God allows you to be overlooked by people is so you don't start depending on their validation. Because if everyone applauded you, you might get addicted to the approval of people and miss the approval of God. And so God hides you, not to hurt you, but to teach you that His affirmation is enough. And once you get anchored in that truth, you no longer need constant recognition to keep going. You no longer need the approval of others to keep building. You no longer need the applause of the crowd to stay faithful. Because you know the eyes of the Father are on you, and His gaze is worth more than any human recognition. God sees what others overlook, which means He also sees the effort you think went unnoticed, the discipline that nobody clapped for, the consistency that nobody mentioned, the prayers you prayed for others that they never knew about, the love you gave that was never reciprocated, the battles you won that nobody knew you were fighting. And when the time is right, God will bring those hidden seeds into the light, because the God who sees is also the God who rewards, and nothing you do in faith is wasted in His sight. So if you feel overlooked today, remind yourself that being unseen by people doesn't mean being unseen by God. the same God who saw David in the field, Hagar in the wilderness, Hannah in her anguish, Elijah under the tree, sees you right where you are. And he doesn't just see the polished version of you that you present to others. He sees the real you, the tired you, the weary you, the struggling you, and still calls you chosen, still calls you loved, still calls you his child, because his eyes are always on you, and his gaze is never distracted, and his attention never shifts away from you even for a moment, because to him you are worth seeing, you are worth noticing, and you are worth loving beyond measure. Being tired doesn't mean you're failing. It simply means you've been carrying weight, giving effort, pouring yourself into something that matters. And when your body feels drained, when your mind feels worn, when your spirit feels stretched thin, that is not a sign of weakness or defeat, but evidence that you've been in the fight. Because failure is not measured by exhaustion, it's measured by surrender. And as long as you're still standing, even if barely, you have not failed. You are still enduring, you are still moving forward, and you are still in the hands of a God who promises strength for the weary and power for the faint. So don't confuse tiredness with defeat, because they are not the same thing. Think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, sweating drops of blood, overwhelmed to the point of sorrow, tired in his humanity, yet still in the center of God's will. And if the Son of God could feel the weight of weariness without it disqualifying him, then so can you. Because being tired doesn't mean you missed God's plan. It doesn't mean you're out of alignment. It doesn't mean you lack faith. It simply means you are human, and in your humanity you discover the sufficiency of God's grace. Because his strength shows up most clearly when your strength runs out, and his power shines brightest when your energy is gone. So when you're tired, don't assume you're failing. Assume God is preparing to pour fresh strength into you. The enemy loves to whisper in moments of fatigue, telling you that because you're worn out, you're weak. Because you're drained, you're disqualified. Because you're tired, you're not good enough. But the truth is that tiredness is a part of growth. Every person who has ever walked in purpose has walked through seasons of exhaustion. Moses got tired leading the people. Elijah got tired after the battle on Mount Carmel. David got tired running from Saul. Paul got tired under the weight of ministry. And yet in every moment of fatigue, God was still faithful, still present, still empowering his people to keep moving. And he is doing the same with you. Sometimes we think if we were really strong in faith, we wouldn't get tired. But that's not true. Even the strongest get weary. Isaiah said, even youths grow tired, and young men stumble and fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Which means God already factored in your weariness before he gave you your calling. He already knew there would be nights when you wanted to quit, mornings when you didn't feel like getting out of bed, days when you felt like the weight was too much. And yet he still trusted you with the assignment, because he knows your tired moments are not the end of you. They are the place where his power begins to flow. Being tired doesn't mean you're failing. It often means you're right on track, because the enemy doesn't bother exhausting someone who isn't a threat. And if you feel drained, it may be because you've been pressing towards something significant. It may be because you've been stepping into new levels. It may be because you've been refusing to give up even when everything inside of you wanted to. And God sees that. He sees the weariness that no one else acknowledges. He sees the times you kept going when you had nothing left. He sees the moments you held on to faith when your heart was breaking. And he promises that your strength will be renewed in him. There's a difference between quitting and resting. And many times what you need is not to throw in the towel, but to take a breath, because God never designed you to carry life in your own power. He designed you to lean on his. And rest is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of wisdom. It's an act of trust that says, God is still working while I lay down. God is still fighting while I recover. God is still moving even while I pause. So instead of beating yourself up for being tired, let yourself find rest in Him, because your tiredness doesn't cancel your assignment. It simply invites you to lean on the one who never grows weary. Think of how a runner feels in a marathon: muscles burning, lungs aching, body exhausted. But that exhaustion doesn't mean they're losing. It means they're in the race. It means they're making progress. It means they're moving toward the finish line. And the same is true for you. Your exhaustion is proof that you've been running, that you've been enduring, that you've been pressing. And just because you don't feel strong right now doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. And in your humanity, God steps in with His divinity to carry you further than you could ever carry yourself. So when you're tired, don't call it failure. Call it proof. Proof that you're showing up, proof that you're fighting, proof that you're walking by faith, proof that you're pushing toward purpose. And let that proof remind you that God is still with you, strengthening you, upholding you, and preparing you to rise again with renewed energy and greater perseverance than before. Your struggle is not wasted, because every tear you've cried, every night you've laid awake wondering if things would ever change, every moment you've fought battles that no one else knew about is seen, remembered, and redeemed by God. And while it may feel like you've been walking through seasons of pain with no purpose, heaven has been recording every step, because nothing you endure in faith is ever in vain. And what looks meaningless in the moment becomes the very material God uses to build your testimony, shaping your character, refining your faith, and preparing you for the greater things He has already set before you. So even when you can't see the reason, you can trust there is a reason. When Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold into slavery, and falsely accused in Egypt, it looked like years of struggle with no reward. It looked like his suffering was wasted. But the very betrayal, the very prison, the very hardship became the path that positioned him to step into the palace. And what others intended for evil, God used for good. Because every step of the struggle was part of the preparation. And in the same way, your struggle is not an interruption to your purpose. It is a part of your purpose. The very thing you think is breaking you may be the thing that is building you into the person God has called you to be. Sometimes the hardest seasons are the holiest seasons, because they teach you what comfort never could. They force you to lean on God in ways you wouldn't have otherwise. They stretch your faith. They strip away your self-reliance. They open your eyes to the fact that God's strength is made perfect in weakness. And while you might despise the season of struggle while you are in it, when you look back, you will see how God used it to strengthen you, to mature you, to prepare you for the weight of the blessings that were coming. Because God will never waste the struggle of His children. He redeems every detail. Think about the Apostle Paul, who endured shipwrecks, beatings, prison, and rejection. Yet he declared that these light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Which means Paul understood that the struggle was not wasted. It was producing something unseen. And the same is true for you. What you are going through may feel heavy, but it is producing something inside of you that will last longer than the pain. It is shaping an eternal weight of glory that you cannot yet fully comprehend. And though you would not choose the struggle, you will one day thank God for how He used it. Your struggle is not wasted because it becomes a testimony for someone else. The very thing you thought would disqualify you becomes the thing God uses to help someone else find freedom. Your scars become someone else's survival guide. Your pain becomes someone else's hope. And the moments you thought were going to destroy, you end up becoming the very story that inspires others to keep going. Because nothing is more powerful than a person who has walked through the fire and come out with faith intact. So your struggle is not just for you. It is for everyone who will be encouraged by your perseverance and strengthened by your story. Sometimes it feels like the waiting seasons, the broken seasons, The lonely seasons are wasted years, but nothing is wasted in God's economy, because He makes all things work together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And that means even the moments you want to erase from your story are the very moments He uses to write redemption into your life. So the divorce, the heartbreak, the setback, the diagnosis, the disappointment, the failure, none of it is wasted. Because in the hands of God, everything broken becomes material for something beautiful. And everything painful becomes the foundation for something powerful. It may not look like it right now, but your struggle is building endurance. And endurance builds character, and character builds hope. And hope does not put you to shame. Because God's love has been poured into your heart through His Spirit. So while you think you're just surviving, heaven knows you're being strengthened. While you think you're just struggling, heaven knows you're being shaped. And while you think your pain is pointless, heaven knows it is purposeful. Because God does not waste anything His children go through. He turns every setback into a setup, every mess into a message, every trial into a testimony. So when you feel like your struggle is meaningless, remember that it is not wasted, because God is using it to grow you, to prepare you, to strengthen you, to position you, and to shape your story into something that will not only glorify Him, but also give hope to others who feel like they cannot make it through their own struggles. And while you may not understand it in the moment, one day you will look back and realize that even the darkest chapters of your life were not wasted. They were woven into the story of God's faithfulness, and they became the very evidence that He was with you. Even when it felt like He was silent, God's strength shows up in your weakness, because weakness is not the disqualification you think it is. It is actually the invitation for God to step in and do what only He can do. And so often we try to hide our weakness. We try to cover it. We try to pretend we have it all together. But the truth is that the moments when we feel the most incapable, the most fragile, the most drained are the very moments God's power is positioned to shine the brightest. Because His strength is not revealed in the moments when we are full of confidence in ourselves. His strength is revealed when we have nothing left to offer, when we've come to the end of our ability, when we've run out of answers, and we realize we cannot do it on our own. And it is in that moment of surrender that His grace fills the gaps and His power carries the load we could not carry. The Apostle Paul wrestled with this very reality when he begged God 3 times to take away the thorn in his flesh. Yet the response he received was not removal of the weakness, but the revelation that God's grace is sufficient, for His power is made perfect in weakness. And Paul learned to boast in his weakness, not because weakness is enjoyable, but because weakness became the stage for God's power to perform. And the same is true for you, because the thing you think disqualifies you is often the thing God uses to display His strength. The very area where you feel limited is the area where God demonstrates He has no limits. The very place where you feel like you can't hold on is the place where God proves He is the one holding you. We live in a culture that celebrates strength, self-sufficiency, independence, and control, but the kingdom of God operates differently, because the way up is down. The way to victory often looks like surrender. The way to power is through weakness. And while the world says, hide your flaws, God says, bring them to me. While the world says, act strong, God says, lean on my strength. While the world says, do it yourself, God says, trust that I am with you. And so your weakness does not have to be the thing that embarrasses you. It can be the thing that humbles you and draws you closer to the one who never fails. When you are weak, you learn dependency. And dependency on God is not a step backward. It's the very thing that propels you forward. Because when you finally let go of the pressure to hold it all together, you discover that God is the one who was holding you the entire time. And the moments you felt like collapsing, the moments you felt like giving up, the moments you felt like you couldn't take another step, Those were the moments his strength was carrying you. Because if you made it through storms you thought would kill you, if you stood up after falls that should have kept you down, if you're still here after everything you've been through, then it's not because you were strong enough. It's because God's strength showed up in your weakness. Your weakness becomes a testimony because people don't relate to perfection. They relate to honesty. And when you admit your weakness, but testify of God's strength, you point people back to the source because they know it wasn't you. It was God in you. And maybe that's why God allows weakness to remain in our lives, not to shame us, but to remind us that we are vessels, and He is the power inside the vessel. So that when others look at our lives, they see not human strength, but divine grace, not flawless performance, but faithful perseverance, not self-sufficiency, but spirit dependency, because the treasure is not in us. The treasure is Christ in us. Think of Gideon, hiding in fear when God called him a mighty warrior, and Gideon tried to argue with his weakness, his inadequacy, his lack of credentials. But God reminded him that the strength was not in Gideon's ability, but in God's presence. And with only 300 men, Gideon defeated an army, not because of human might, but because of divine strength. And that same principle still stands. You may look at your resources and feel weak. You may look at your past and feel unqualified. You may look at your struggles and feel incapable. But God looks at your weakness and says, my power works perfectly there. And you will see victories not because you were strong enough, but because He was strong in you. Even Jesus, in His humanity, experienced weakness. Weary from His journey at the well, sweating drops of blood in the garden, collapsing under the weight of the cross. Yet in every moment of human weakness, the power of God was at work fulfilling the plan of salvation. Because the greatest victory in history came not through human strength, but through apparent weakness, as the Son of God hung on a cross. And what looked like defeat was the very place where victory was secured, proving once and for all that weakness is not the end of the story. It is the place where God does His greatest work. So don't despise your weakness. Don't run from it. Don't be ashamed of it. Because your weakness is where God shows you His strength. Your weakness is where grace meets you. Your weakness is where power is perfected. And your weakness is where you discover that you don't have to be enough, because He already is. And as long as He is with you, your weakness is never the end. It is the doorway for His strength to be revealed in ways you never imagined. Rest is holy, not optional. Because from the very beginning of creation, God Himself set the example after speaking the world into existence, after forming light, sky, seas, land, stars, animals, and mankind. He rested on the seventh day, not because He was tired, but to establish a rhythm for us, to show us that rest is not weakness, but worship, not laziness, but alignment. Because when you pause, you are declaring that the world does not revolve around your effort. You are acknowledging that God is the one who sustains all things, and you are trusting that He is still working even while you are still. And this is why true rest is not just sleeping, it is soul rest, the kind of peace that comes from laying down your burdens at His feet and believing that He is enough. We live in a culture that glorifies business, where exhaustion is worn like a badge of honor, where people equate productivity with value. But God never designed you to run on empty. He created you with limits. He created your body to need sleep, your mind to need renewal, your spirit to need refreshment. And when you ignore those God-given limits, you are not proving how strong you are. You are proving how much you've forgotten your need for Him. Because when you try to carry everything on your own, you are stepping into a role only God was meant to fill. And rest is the reminder that you are human, that you are not God. And that's okay, because you don't have to be. Even Jesus, the Son of God, practiced rest. He withdrew from crowds to pray. He took time to be alone with the Father. He fell asleep on the boat in the middle of a storm, showing us that resting is not optional for those who are doing kingdom work. It is essential, because ministry, family, calling, and responsibility all take strength, and that strength must be renewed. And if Jesus himself rested, how much more do we need to embrace rest as part of obedience? Because rest is not about neglecting responsibility. It is about recharging so you can carry it with grace. Sometimes we resist rest because we feel guilty, as if stopping makes us irresponsible. But true rest is not neglect, it is trust. It is saying, God, I believe you can handle what I can't. I believe you are still in control when I step away. I believe you are working while I wait. And that kind of rest is holy because it's an act of surrender. It's an act of worship. It's an act of faith. And without it, we run the risk of burning out, of breaking down, of trying to pour from an empty cup. When God never asked us to live that way, rest is holy because it recenters you. It reminds you of your identity in God and not in what you do. It strips away the illusion that you are what you produce, and it anchors you back in the truth that you are a child of God, loved not for your performance, but for who you are in Him. And when you embrace rest, you allow your soul to breathe. You create space to hear His voice again. You slow down enough to notice His presence, and you realize that sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to stop striving and simply rest in Him. Think about Elijah. After his great victory on Mount Carmel, he ran in fear, exhausted, discouraged, ready to give up. And what did God do? He didn't scold Elijah for being tired. He let him sleep. He fed him. He gave him rest. Because sometimes the solution is not more striving, but more resting. Sometimes what your soul needs most is not another battle, but a moment of restoration. And God knows this, which is why He designed rest to be part of your rhythm. Because rest heals, rest restores, rest prepares you for the next assignment. When we resist rest, we step outside of God's design and we start carrying what was never ours to carry. But when we embrace rest, we align ourselves with His wisdom. We remember that He is the provider, He is the sustainer, He is the one who opens doors. And we don't have to work ourselves into the ground to make things happen. Because what God has for you cannot be earned by overexertion. It can only be received by faith. And sometimes faith looks like letting go of the hustle and embracing the holiness of rest. Rest is not optional because without it you lose perspective. You lose strength. You lose the clarity to see what God is doing, but with it you gain renewal. You gain peace. You gain the ability to keep moving forward without collapsing. Because rest is not just physical. It is spiritual. It is a reminder that the God who never sleeps is watching over you, and that you don't have to stay awake trying to control everything, because He is in control, and you can lie down in peace knowing that He has you in His hands. So when you feel guilty for stopping, when you feel like pausing is falling behind, when you feel like resting is wasting time, remember that rest is holy. It was commanded by God, modeled by Jesus, and required for your soul to thrive. And when you honor rest, you are not stepping out of your calling. You are stepping deeper into it. Because you are showing that your faith is not in your effort, but in His strength, not in your striving, but in His sovereignty, not in your constant motion, but in His constant presence. Your struggle today is preparing you for tomorrow, because every hardship you are facing, every obstacle standing in your way, every sleepless night and heavy burden you carry is not just something you are going through. It is something you are growing through. And what feels like pressure right now is shaping the strength you will need later. Because God does not waste the struggles of His children. He uses them as training grounds for greater responsibility, greater endurance, and greater purpose. And even though you may wish the struggle would go away, one day you will look back and see that it was the very thing that equipped you to step into the next season of your life with wisdom, maturity, and resilience that you would not have developed otherwise. Think about how David faced lions and bears in the fields while caring for sheep. And at the time it may have felt like an unnecessary struggle, like a burden that no one else understood. But those very battles prepared him for the day he stood before Goliath, because the courage, the skill, And the faith he developed in private became the tools he needed for his public victory. And in the same way, the struggles you are facing in this season are not random, they are preparation. And God is training your hands for battle and your heart for perseverance, so that when the giant shows up in your future, you will be ready to face it. Because you already learned in secret that God is faithful. Sometimes we think struggle means we are moving in the wrong direction. But often it means the opposite, because pressure precedes promotion, and resistance is proof that you are moving forward. Just like a seed must struggle to push through the dirt before it breaks into the light, your current struggle is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of growth. And if you could see how God is using this season to toughen your spirit, to sharpen your faith, and to deepen your trust, you would realize that what feels unbearable right now is actually building the version of you who will be able to carry the blessing and responsibility of tomorrow without collapsing under the weight. Your struggle is preparing you to handle what you prayed for. Because it is one thing to receive a blessing, it is another to carry it well. And God loves you too much to give you something that will crush you. So he allows seasons of stretching to strengthen you. He allows battles to build you. He allows waiting to mature you. And though you may hate the process is producing something inside of you that comfort never could. And if you skip the struggle, you would also skip the strength it brings, because endurance is only developed when you keep moving through resistance. Think about Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison, and yet every single struggle was shaping him into the leader God had called him to be. Because the humility he learned in the pit prepared him for compassion in the palace. The endurance he learned in prison prepared him for wisdom and leadership. And the patience he learned in waiting prepared him for stewardship when the famine came. And in the same way, the struggle you are in right now is not the end of your story. It is the shaping of your story. And God is preparing you for a tomorrow where the pain you feel today will make sense, because it was not wasted. It was woven into the preparation for your purpose. Even in nature, we see that struggle is necessary, because a butterfly must fight its way out of the cocoon in order to strengthen its wings. And if someone were to cut the cocoon open to make the process easier, the butterfly would emerge too weak to fly. And in the same way, God will not always remove your struggle, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows the fight is giving you strength, and the resistance is giving you resilience. And the very thing you wish he would take away is the thing he is using to prepare you to soar. Your struggle today is preparing you not only for tomorrow's blessings, but also for tomorrow's battles. Because new levels bring new challenges, and the strength you are building right now is the strength you will need to withstand what comes next. And the faith you are exercising today will be the faith you draw on tomorrow. And every tear, every disappointment, every setback is building a foundation of perseverance that will keep you standing when the storms of tomorrow come. Because God is not just preparing you to survive, he is preparing you to stand strong, to lead, to endure, and to fulfill the assignment he has placed on your life. So don't despise the struggle, because the struggle is shaping you. The struggle is preparing you. The struggle is building a future version of you that you cannot yet see. And while you may feel weak right now, you are being made strong. While you may feel like giving up, you are being equipped to go further. While you may feel like this season is breaking you, it is actually making you. And one day you will see that the struggle you hated the most was the very thing that prepared you for the tomorrow you prayed for.